Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's conversation explores one woman's journey with chronic illness after serving in the U.S. Navy and the deeper questions that experience led her to investigate. After becoming suddenly ill in the 90s and eventually being diagnosed with myalgic encephalomyelitis, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome, CFS, she began searching beyond symptom management to understand what might be happening at the cellular level. In this episode, we'll discuss mitochondrial function, nutrient metabolism, and oxygen delivery, and how these foundational biological processes relate to energy production in the body. We'll also examine published research surrounding emerging infections, including Mycoplasma, fermentans, incognitus, and the controversial work of former medical professor Dr. Garth Nicholson, whose investigations into Gulf War illness raised difficult scientific and policy questions. This conversation reflects personal experience and discussion of published research. It is not medical advice, but an explanation of one individual's path towards understanding chronic illness through the lens of cellular health. Welcome, Stephanie Anson. Can you introduce yourself, please? Share your background and walk us through what happened to you after you joined the Navy in 1995, including the pinprick incident, how quickly you became ill, and what were the first symptoms like? Welcome, Stephanie.
Hi, Ash. Thank you for having me here. It was actually very interesting because I come from a very large military family. And that was actually, my destination to join for many reasons. One, very familiar with the military, growing up around it. Two, I was very proud to serve my country. And three, at the time, I wasn't able to directly attend college. And so this was a great alternative for me so I could get out there and just really start my life. So I joined in 95. And of course, upon joining, like everyone else, you go through a health assessment. And part of that assessment, you also get multiple pinpricks. Okay. And those pinpricks, at least what I had received, had exposed me to a weaponized biologic. And within 48 hours, I was hospitalized with a rapid onset of severe symptoms. Part of that was inflamed organs. I had high inflammation running through my body. I had erratic heart palpitations. Memory loss, of course, that was more long-term over time versus in the very beginning. I also had cognitive decline and, of course, chronic fatigue, which a lot of people are very familiar with that today, whether they understand what it truly is or isn't. And eventually, I was officially diagnosed from the medical community and listed in my Navy medical record as having myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is what Ash had said is chronic fatigue syndrome, also known as CFS.
Wow. What was your experience at Portsmouth Naval Hospital? How did it feel being grouped with patients that are diagnosed with ALS and MS and fibromyalgia and CFS?
What actually happened is going through that first initial wave of being sick and then, of course, then trying to figure out what was going on with me. I eventually ended up having to do a weekly meeting at the Portsmouth Naval Hospital, and other patients that were there were those that were suffering from MS, CFS, ALS, fibromyalgia, which I thought was really weird because at the time I didn't understand that they are associated. And, and as we kind of go through this discussion, we'll talk about why they actually are associated. In addition to those weekly meetings, which kind of felt psychological, to be honest with you, there was a lot of prodding about what we thought and a lot of into our mind, which I thought was really odd, but I was 18 years old. I was young. What do I know? Part of that also was having injections that were in my spine, all kinds of medication. And so constant blood work, is in and out. All I knew is I didn't feel good. I was young. I was very trusting of the people, all the authority. I mean, who would imagine that your government would do anything like that to you, right? I mean, it's ingrained in us that, when you join the service, and I heard all growing up, is that you never leave a man behind. So with that kind of message being delivered and hammered into you, growing up around it, going through boot camp, being in the service itself, you just can't imagine that there would be any association to the government with your onset of sickness. And so I just wanted answers.
Yeah. I mean, we are getting these answers and they are flooding, right? So Stephanie, as your illness progressed over the years, how did these symptoms evolve? What was your experience navigating the traditional medical system, including firing doctors and being given different diagnoses and prescriptions?
Over time, when it started getting really bad, right, was kind of in my 30s, I started having severe memory loss. The cognitive decline was very evident. Fatigue was just off the charts. I woke up exhausted, and it really stopped me from engaging in having a social life. And I really just did not have an ability to function. So when I had first left the service, I tried going to the VA. And they teach you to keep a copy of your medical record and your service record, right? I had both on microfiche, and I had a physical copy of my medical record. So I had started going to the VA after I had gotten out. And, the first time I show up, they didn't have me in the system. They didn't have a copy of my medical record. And I'm like, okay, it's government. I've heard of this before with past vets that came out of Gulf War or came out of Vietnam and their medical records are gone. Didn't happen not one time. It happened on 3 different occasions. And by the 3rd time that I had provided a complete copy to them, I started thinking this is probably not the best place for me, because not just was I thinking that was really weird, that how do you lose that medical record on 3 occasions, but also all they wanted to do was talk to me about doing spinal surgery, which, yes, I do have a spinal condition that happened when I was in service, but it wasn't debilitating. I was able to function perfectly fine. And I did that with support of exercise as much as I could, dealing with the symptoms that I had. And because I know that the support of the muscles support the spine. And so that's really kind of what kept me out of having tremendous pain or wanting to do anything. But then they also started giving me all kinds of prescriptions. Finally was really turned off, and I turned away. And at the same time, I started learning about holistic care. And I was never one to lean towards medications. I kind of grow very suspicious. I also lost, a family member to organ failure on multiple different medications. And that was kind of around the time frame when they had gotten rid of the multiple scripts that doctors were able to provide because of the contraindications of those medicines. I just refused all of those drugs and tried looking out for holistic ways to increase my quality of care, because my quality of life was just deteriorating.
Yeah. I can't even imagine being stuck in a body where you were so injured. At what point did you begin looking beyond symptom management?
In 2016 timeframe, I came across, because I was doing a lot of research. I know where whistleblowers go for the military. I was always out there kind of lurking to see what I could find. When I was in the service, there was a huge ongoing around 9/11, because I had gotten out right before 9/11 happened. And there was a lot of issues with pinpricks and what was, causing ailments to individuals. That never left my mind. Also didn't leave my mind that within 48 hours of me receiving 3 guns filled with multiple on each arm, that I had a correlation and felt in my heart of hearts that it was related. Because how do you go from perfectly healthy one day, and then within 48 hours of receiving that, you're in the hospital and your body's never the same since? And so during that research, I had come upon 2 whistleblowers. One of them was Dr. Garth Nicholson, who founded the Institute for Molecular Medicine. He was also a PhD professor at the University of Texas at Houston, and he testified in front of Congress as a medical witness expert 6 times about Gulf War illness and what he discovered in his laboratory, and from testing his stepdaughter who came back from the Gulf War. She was part of the 101st Airborne, and she returned and she had what they considered at the time Gulf War illness. And so his investigations into that raised difficult scientific and policy questions. And he started to identify that this is not something that just develops on its own. He discovered that there was a weaponized mycoplasma called Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus. And he found that the pinpricks were associated, and most likely the mechanism through which veterans became infected with the mycoplasma. And that led to significant increases in neurodegenerative and autoimmune diseases over the last 30 to 35 years. And the other whistleblower is Dr. Mycoplasma, which I'll show here, and I'll explain that shortly. She worked under Rhymes with Ouchie as one of the chief scientists, and she came out one day on a podcast, and this was right before the CV hit, and she came out on a podcast and stated that they had been developing and experimenting with a form of mycoplasma on the military with uninformed consent. And in fact, 1 in 4 were injected with it. And as you can see here, when I met her, I was sure to make my shirt state that, right? And she took recognition right away because she knew what I was talking about by reading that shirt. The mycoplasma, what I learned was that my diagnosis, okay, my medical diagnosis was 100% related to the weaponized mycoplasma, which is also listed as a class 2 DoD non-lethal bioweapon.
It just breaks my heart. It renders me speechless. Stephanie, can you explain mycoplasma and how it's associated to cellular health and the impact on the mitochondria of the cell?
Yeah. So what I discovered through this journey is that the mycoplasma is 100% related to cellular health, particularly the mitochondria of the cell. See, the mitochondria, right? They act as like these little batteries inside the cells, and they produce about 90% of the cellular ATP, which is the energy. Okay. And that energy is required for so many functions in our body that we don't even realize. So brain clarity, heart rhythm stability, immune response, hormone regulation, detoxification. And so when the mitochondria struggles, right, that's when you can kind of see a wide range of symptoms that can occur. And I'll just kind of show this here, which you can see, and a lot of people suffer from these, right? You've got cognitive issues, persistent fatigue, you've got joint pain, gastrointestinal, which I definitely suffered from. You've got neurological impact, organ damage. It deals with your heart and kidneys. And so you have severe reactions, right? Because what happens with the mycoplasma is that it travels everywhere in the body and it hides itself. Okay. So, which is why it's hard to identify. So it goes through the blood circulation, and that's where it goes into the joints, right? And into the deep tissue, into the internal organs, and it affects the nervous system. The mycoplasma itself is an extremely small bacteria. Okay. And it lacks a traditional cell wall, which it allows it to reside inside the host cells. So when it does that, it acts kind of like a parasite, right? So it can't produce any nutrients for itself. So it's actually got to derive those nutrients from somewhere else. And that is where it starts attacking the mitochondria, because it pulls the nutrients that your system would rely on in order to fuel that mitochondria, right, with oxygen and dense nutrition in order for your cells to function the way that they were designed. So since it relies heavily on the host for nutrients, and robs the mitochondria of them, then it competes basically for the food of the cell. The host's resources, meaning the cell's resources, aren't being utilized for how the cell needs to function and to thrive. And by doing that, it interferes with the mitochondrial function, strips the cells of the energy, and that's where you start to see decline. And it takes time for decline to become evident. People that sometimes think that they're perfectly healthy, they could have a silent storm in their body and they have no idea what's going on until all of a sudden those symptoms just pop up and they're very sick. And in my case, it was instant because I had an immediate reaction to what happened. This brings me back to Dr. Nicholson and Dr. Mycoplasma's, findings. What they found, especially Dr. Nicholson, these are in his reports, 40% of veterans that tested positive for the mycoplasma infections transferred it to 40% infection rate in their family. That is over 90% of adult family members with CFS tested positive in some reports. The Kansas State Department of Epidemiology has a study that was done by Leah Steele, and she studied Kansas veterans, that came back from the Gulf War. Found it didn't matter what service they were in. It could be any of the services. And even those veterans that never actually were over there, they could have been stateside. She found that 34% who had received multiple pinpricks actually came down with the illness. And it's also further supported by the British Lancet study that had similar findings. So Dr. Nicholson had discovered that, this is really odd because this is associated also to CFS, ALS, MS, and fibromyalgia, these are diseases that were hardly heard of 30 to 35 years ago. But today we find that they're extremely common. So what he saw with the significant rise in the neurodegenerative diseases and autoimmune disorders are fatiguing illnesses and the rheumatoid arthritis. And he found that the number one underlying factor for any of this taking place in someone's body was the Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus. And he stated, this is really important because I think a lot of veterans really need to understand this. He stated that it was approved in the 1970s by the Division of Biologics, which is under the National Institute of Health. Okay. And it was never approved of by the FDA.
And here we have a situation where, as you heard RFK recently say, over 71% of Americans are living with a chronic disease. So this is the point we've come to. We're going to pivot a little bit and we're going to talk a little bit more about what to do about these things. So Stephanie, can you explain the importance of dense nutrients and oxygen-rich blood for our mitochondrial health? And why are these factors so foundational for our overall cell functions?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, when I first got into this research, I was looking for the needle in the haystack, right? Not really kind of understanding what it was I was looking for, but I knew there had to be something out there that gave me some insight on how to start having some recovery. And so through that research and labs and the work completed by Dr. Nicholson and Dr. Mycoplasma, I learned how important nutrition is for the cell, okay? Dense, superior micronutrition and oxygen as well. They're very important to cellular health. Without them, the mitochondria doesn't thrive. After realizing that dealing with the mitochondria is you're dealing with root cause because it's central to your cells thriving. And I know that the mycoplasma robs that, and that's where you start seeing cellular decline. I just started focusing on, what could provide me dense nutrition and oxygen, right? And so there's a lot of supplements out there. I mean, like I said, this has been a 30-year journey. I started focusing on blood health and blood flow and detox pathways. And at the time, especially in the medical field, the only individuals that really speak about that are on the holistic side, right? And I was at a point where I refused to deal or take any kind of medication because I was very concerned about what was in it. And I already didn't trust the system from what happened to me. So by focusing on the blood pathways and the mitochondria, then I did find a product that actually super fuels that and, started my recovery process.
And how did you discover, or how did you start that recovery process?
I was getting to a point where nothing was working and I was kind of shutting down, right? And I was a little depressed. We have a mutual friend who is a licensed holistic practitioner. And at the age of 48, I was looking at possibly retiring. I wasn't able to formulate my sentences properly. I was losing awareness of, my surroundings. The fatigue was off the charts. I didn't have really engagement with a lot of people. My mind seemed to drift a lot. I had massive memory loss, and I was basically at a point where I just was deflated, depressed, and I had given up because after searching as long as I have, and I deep dive into PubMed and I do go out there and really kind of read the reports. I'm one of those people that I actually sit down and read all the reports. And because it's really important to me to actually understand what's going on versus relying on other people's words. Because I found over time that not everybody knows everything, even if they're the so-called expert. So I got tired of waking up exhausted and dealing with the debilitating gut issues, and my eyesight was declining, and that was actually a personal injury, but it was happening all at once. And I had read data many times over that there's a way to deal with your brain function, and I just wanted something that was going to address it. In addition to the heavy metals, that I got from all of these, that I knew I was suffering from. And that was something that our mutual friend was actually treating me for. She was trying to help me get past the heavy metals, past the blood-brain barrier. And
Right.
see, and that's what the CFS attacks. It attacks the brain, specifically the areas of cognition, memory, and speech. My father comes home and he's really upset, and I'm standing in his house. And he comes and says, they're going to take my nose. And he had tears in his eyes. And I was just like, I think about me and my health, it's one thing, but when it's a family member, I seem to go beyond what I would do for myself, and kind of snapped me out of it because, our mutual friend, she was trying to convince me to get on this one product. And I I just was tired. It was a disappointment. I did not want to be disappointed again, especially at how low I was already feeling and what I was going through. So when he came in and he had tears in his eyes and he said, Steph, they're going to cut my nose off. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I'll show it here.
Okay.
So as you can see on his skin, the tip of his skin right there, or the tip of his nose, excuse me, that is where he had this skin condition, okay, that was deteriorating the tip of his nose, and they had cut it off. And they had to graft skin off his body back onto his nose. And about 5 years later, you'll see in the upper portion, this other hole started developing, okay? And it didn't originally develop that way. So what had happened at first, it was just a little spot on his nose, and then it started growing and widening. And not only that, but you could put your finger in it. Well, that's when they told him, listen, we've given you everything orally, everything that you could put on topically, and it's not working. So he had this hole for about 9 months. Nothing internal, external worked. So he said, you know what? We're going to take the nose. And I told him, I said, Dad, listen, there's a product that a friend of mine has been trying to get me on. And I said, how about we do it together? I said, it's a 4 months for this protocol. And I said, it's this sublingual spray right here. I said, 4 months for this protocol. And what's it going to matter? If they're going to take your nose, you're going to take your nose. So I said, let's just do it together. And actually, that's what ended up getting me on the protocol, not her convincing, but seeing my dad. I know if he would have lost his nose, I probably wouldn't have him around for very much longer, because that, for his psychosis, I just know him. And I think he would have declined pretty quick. And he was also dealing with other issues too. And we see this very common with age-related diseases. So as our family members age or our friends age, it might take them a little bit longer to respond to you when you ask them a question. They might stare off for a little while, or what I call daydreaming. It takes them a few minutes to process what you ask them or what they're trying to tell you before they kind of engage. And I had already seen him kind of slip in that manner. So I was thinking, well, maybe this product will help my brain, help him, in addition to his nose. We said, why not? So as you can see in the photo here, this was 2/15 of 2025. That was before he started. I took that the day he actually started, and he started using a cream, okay, and this spray, which I do have some in here. And so what he would do is, the protocol requires for you to do 4 sprays under the tongue 3 times daily. And he put this on topically twice a day. Within 1 week, you see on 2/23, 1 week of the cream and the micronutrition spray, he started having results. And then week 2, you see again on 3/1, even better. And then of course by 3/12, and it was already fully recovered by the time I actually took this photo, you can see how well his nose looked. And so that was pure convincing for me. And during that process, what I was going through was amazing. So by the 3rd day, I was in my kitchen, right? So I'm normally in bed by 7 o'clock. I'm out, like my laptop's on my lap. I work a lot, when I am awake, and I was out. No, my husband would have to get me up, take me to bed. And so within 3 days, I was in my kitchen up at midnight, which is unheard of unless I'm physically out of the house and in the public somewhere where you have a lot of stimulation. But I was zooming around my kitchen, doing dishes, playing music. And that's just something I haven't done in years, because I basically was shutting down. And so my brain was also buzzing. I felt this weird sensation in my brain, like bees. And then, of course, I started noticing that I was able to articulate my words. I wasn't messing them up. And I started seeing that I wasn't losing my awareness of where I was. And the other thing that I suffered from, which is huge, is I have rheumatoid arthritis, which is another condition associated to the Mycoplasma. And the problem was my hands would lock, right? And I couldn't unbend them. So probably, several times a month I would go through this, and I'd have to physically put my hands down onto a flat surface and push down to unlock them. And it was very, very, very painful. And so then the other thing that I started seeing is that my digestive functions with the autoimmune I was dealing with started changing, right? I started dealing less with the constipation and the bloating. I noticed that my face, the inflammation completely drained out of my face almost instantly. And the same thing with my eyes, because I had looked like the Walking Dead for so long, and I'm not trying to say that the spray is a cure. Okay. But what I am telling you is that the only thing I changed, and the only thing my father changed, was taking the sublingual spray, right, which is micronutrition. And what I said about mitochondria, you've got to remember that the delivery of nutrition and oxygen to the mitochondria of the cell is the powerhouse. And that is root, right? That is the foundation to realigning your cells and having your body starting to function properly. And then, of course, also, with the cream, which you can also eat too. So it's the first time in 29 years at the time, it's been 30 now, that because I've been on this for about a year, that I had any kind of results, like actual improvement, not where it was just like a day or 2 days and then I'd go back to where I was. I had actual recovery and actual changes in my daily life. And I completely function now different than I did over a year ago, because now I live fully throughout my day. I don't have any of the sleep issues that I was dealing with. I sleep throughout the night. And so that cycle of insomnia to crashing for 18 hours has gone away. The best thing about what I learned is that this supports the foundation, which is the mitochondria of the cell. That dense micronutrition, that superior oxygen delivery is what you need for healthy blood flow, because it doesn't just work in that manner. It also opens up your detoxification pathways for your own body so it can get rid of the toxins, the microplastics, the heavy metals, passes the blood-brain barrier, the glyphosate and the spike protein. And so it really does deliver that mitochondrial support, and it gives your immune. And the best part about it is that this is all plant-based, right from God's garden. And to explain a little bit more about the molecular technology, about the plants and where this is derived from, as well as the cream, Ash, why don't you go ahead and take that away?
Okay. So there's a long, rich history to this product suite. So there's a science team involved that actually started investigating how to go into the structure of plants back in 1973. And this was commissioned by folks in Europe. And so this science team learned how to isolate molecules from 44 of the most profound, potent plants on Earth. And not just the molecules from those plants, but the actual what we would call or reference as the God molecule. These are molecules with no allergens, no oxalates. It can do no harm. There's no contraindication. These are vibrating high with high frequency and light. Those are the only molecules out of each of these plants. No root, stem, leaf type of thing, just molecules. And its frequency. So they learned, and there are 19 patents pending on this, Stephanie. They learned how to extract this frequency and the molecule, so it's a particle and a wave, and they put it into a supercomputer, and they synergistically found out that 44, here they are, the plants, the molecules from these 44 plants could be put into, and their frequency could be put into this sublingual spray, which, like you said, goes under the tongue 3 or more 4 times a day, and it literally goes into the blood-brain barrier. And it, like you, I had the same feeling of bees in the head, and it literally starts pulling out pathogens. And you kind of listed a few of them: heavy metals, parasites, glyphosate, spike protein, mycotoxins from mold, which is huge, microplastics, huge. We are seeing people's blood work, anecdotal blood work, that is just blowing our minds. This is called the 4-month blood cleanse. That is the protocol for this. A blood cell lives 120 days, roughly. We want to expose every blood cell to this spray. So we are getting everyone to jump in and get their blood clean. It's very timely. This came to the US in 2019. And we're seeing recoveries across the board. We're not allowed to list diagnoses, but I can tell you, if you've heard of it, we've seen a recovery from it. And it's blowing our mind. We've dubbed it the rescue mission. We're taking this global. We're about to have a global expansion. But everyone, every living creature with blood does need to clean their blood. And I've actually used this on my pets. I've had remarkable recovery of things with my pets. Myself, I no longer have a chronic illness. I was diagnosed, in 2024 with something that is technically not curable. I now have, I'm 13 months on the spray. I have no symptoms. I'm completely recovered. Like you, I'm articulating, I'm driving, my handwriting is better. I have a life again. I not only was the release physical toxins, but it was also emotional trauma, loss and grief that is held in our fascia and our blood. I found that released as well, which I was not expecting. So I'm actually a happier person. I feel closer to God. This has become my only daily routine. If I have to pop something else, if I'm feeling a little bit off, I will. But by and large, this is all I need. If I go on vacation, I take the cream that Stephanie just showed for her, she uses, and her dad, and I use the spray. And that is just because my life is so much easier. And this is my lifestyle now. And I haven't gone back to the maintenance dose. I am on 4 sprays or more 3 times a day for the rest of my life. I'm very grateful to God's garden. This is Revelation 22:2. The green leaves of the plants are for the healing of the nations. So we're walking this out, and it is literally a new paradigm for our planet. We are redefining what wellness is, and we're going back to the basics, which is frequency and plants and sound, and just like you said, nutrient dense vitamins and minerals and all the wonderful things these molecules have.
Yeah, and I wanted to show again a little bit here and talk a little bit more about the story with Dr. Mycoplasma. So I had found her on a podcast, and this was right before the CV had hit. And as you can see here, I'm bawling my eyes out, because if you've lived with these conditions for as long as I have, you always had the door slammed in your face, right? So every time I visit a doctor, it was doctor after doctor, and I'm known for firing doctors in my family because they don't listen to you. You get 15 minutes with them. I could go over what I could in that 15-minute time span about what was going on in my medical record, from the Navy, explain to them the diagnosis, and they would flip right into their own and then prescribe me something. And every single doctor had a different diagnosis for me. And I'm thinking to myself, you're fired, and no, you didn't listen. And how is it that none of you all think what's wrong with me, but none of you have been able to help me. And each one of you have a different diagnosis along with a different prescription. And so when I met her, that's where the tears come from, because I was standing in line to talk to her, and her assistant saw my shirt, and it was made on purpose because I wanted to stand out. And because I listened, I heard what she had to say when she said it was 1 in 4. And I knew from that 48-hour difference in my life that day, that one day that changed me forever, I knew that she would know immediately. And she did. Her assistant parted the line and let me come forward. That's where I started crying. And she actually started crying too. I got a little bit of a video, and we're hugging each other. It's hot that day, right? I'm in shorts and t-shirts, sweating. She's wearing this jacket because of shedding, because the amount of people, there's 11,000 people in this audience. And this is when things just started hitting. And because of the shedding, she was in this jacket because people were around her, and she knew what was going on at that time. Now, remind you, this is before anybody else in the country realized what was happening. And remember who she worked for. So she had verified to me exactly what had taken place. And she said, absolutely 100%. And just to have validation, that's where my tears came from. I was not crazy. And here's the woman that blew the whistle and spent 5 years in international waters fighting for her own existence to come back to the States to fight all this when they came after her. Very well-known whistleblower. Probably a lot of people have seen her on the circuit, talking about medical conditions and things going on in the background. And so, that was really important to me. But, another thing that I want to point out too, when I started this journey, is that I started taking my urine tests, right? These are little strips that I tested my urine from. And, the urine is the carrier for the blood, right? So this product deals with your blood flow and deals with cleansing the blood. So as you can see, I was very acidic, right? Full of just all kinds of toxins and issues. And each month I started improving more and more. And as you can tell, when I finished the 4-month blood protocol, I'm here, getting up to where I kind of need to be. You actually need to be between 7.5 and 8. It wasn't until month 5 that I got there, and I stay there. Now I do I stay on the 4-month protocol. I don't go down to maintenance, which is just 4 sprays once a day, and 1 bottle lasts you a whole month when you're on maintenance. I stay because on the 4-month protocol, because I absolutely love it. I love how I feel And it's almost like I have bottles everywhere. They're on my counter. They're in my car. They're in my handbag. My husband's got one next to the nightstand. I have one on the nightstand. I have them everywhere. We got to remember what happens with cellular health. It's not just mycoplasmas that attack the cell. There are all these other issues that people are dealing with that attack the mitochondria of the cell and deprive the cell of what it needs. And so the delivery system from this product here gets right into the blood, and then it goes right to the mitochondria of the cell. So you're, again, addressing root, right? So you're getting deep into those tissues, you're getting into the bones. And of course, you've got that cellular turnover with your blood, which takes about 4 months.
That's right.
And, that is something that I think is highly important, because right here, I'll show, these are a lot of conditions that are linked to the mycoplasma. So, and we found through those studies, through Dr. Nicholson's studies, is that the mycoplasma is also in the civilian population. It wasn't just through the military personnel that received these pinpricks. Okay. That was also to the community, it's, as a whole. And not only that, but the military personnel or veterans that had this were passing it on to their wives intimately, and their children were being born with it. And you saw an explosion over the last 30 to 35 years of chronic illnesses. And I'm not correlating as this is the only cause. This is part of one of many causes and co-infections that people can find. And it's very important that we change the foundation of what we understand about health. And you even see MAHA and RFK coming out and talking about how they want to go into medical schools and start shifting exactly how nutrition is looked at, because you want to get to root and start treating, not masking, what those symptoms are.
That's right. You cannot continue. We can't continue to do symptom management. Symptom management is not wellness care. It's sick care. And so getting to the root, Stephanie, is exactly what this does. I always said this should be called root cause. What it does is allows the body to be the miraculous vessel that we were created to be. We are regenerative creatures. You remove blood, our body makes new blood. If you cut off part of the liver, the liver can regenerate. Cut your hair, it's regrowing. Like we can regenerate, but not with dirty blood. And so a lot of people say you can't out supplement dirty, poisoned blood. So by going to the root and cleaning the blood, the body is allowed to be the miracle that we are. And that is where the recovery steps in.
Yeah. And what's great about this company is that they're very in tune to helping educate. This is not a product you can just give somebody without the education, right? So we do hold webinars, a lot of one-on-ones where people, they just want someone to tell them it's going to be okay. They just want to know that there's something out there that works, and when I talk to somebody, they pour their heart out to me. And I coming from where I've been, I completely understand. And they're not getting, one, the care. And when I mean care, I'm not talking just about medical. I'm talking about the sincerity of the person they're confiding in that's helping them. You're a 15-minute time slot, right? How is there care involved in that?
There's not. And, we've been conditioned for decades to have a care team or to have someone have authority over our body and tell us what we need to do to be healthy. And that actually needs to change. We have to take that authority back as human beings to learn that we can do this. We can be in charge of our own wellness. And it's actually not as hard as people think. And it certainly doesn't always include things that are prescribed to us that we don't know where they're sourced from, what's in them, and what side effects they could cause. We can kind of go back to the foundations of Earth and draw from them and draw our wellness from there.
Yeah. And, one of the things is, what's very important is that if you do have interest in these products, you want to know more about the science, what it has to offer. The company offers great packages to get started with, because what we found, especially with talking to people, if you were just to try one bottle, and we understand people are on budgets, but one bottle is not going to give you those changes that you need. And so you're going to have disappointment. Yeah. Not only that, but if you try to do it at one bottle at a time, there's not a financial advantage for you, because you actually get savings when you purchase them as a package. Okay. And it's easier. You actually reduce your cost significantly, especially if you bought the 9-bottle pack. And then And we'll show that there. And so these are the different 4 packages that can be offered that people choose from, depending upon your budget, or if you just kind of want to see how this impacts your body to get started. If you're looking for information on how to order, look in the comments below. We've got in the description, we have the information on how to reach out to us. By reaching out to us, you'll also be able to get information from us with regards to the webinars and joining our private Facebook group. And in the private Facebook group, you'll find that there are real people with real stories. And not only do the webinars offer that, the webinars also have the testimonials of folks, everyday folks, just like you, just like me, dealing with things that they had no idea how they got there. They woke up one day and they progressively were ill, or they were instantaneously ill and trying to recover. They've had body shifts and body changes that were an improvement for their life. And they talk about that openly. Sometimes it's very tear-jerking, very emotional. And it's not just the physical aspect. There are also trauma that comes out too. We really, really, really encourage people to join the private group in addition to getting on to the webinars and learning, because without that education component behind it, you're not going to use the product the way you should, and you're not going to see the benefits, because you're going to do what most people do. They want an instant gratification. And it took forever to get sick, and it takes some time in order to recover. And you have to allow your body to do that. You got to think of a process, right? One thing's got to happen first, and then the next, and the next, and then it compounds. And then it starts slowly working its way through the body, and it goes where it's needed. And Ash can kind of talk about that a little bit more.
Yep, it absolutely goes exactly where it's needed. And everybody is different. I've seen certain people that are struggling with liver and kidney issues. That is typically, if you're struggling in your exit pathways, your liver and kidney, we see recovery there first, because if the exhaust system for a car is not working, it's not going to run, right? So when we say bioavailable, that is an understatement. So the research and development was God, right? So he knew exactly who this was for. This was for the healing of the nations. So it is more than bioavailable. It was actually engineered by God himself for our bodies. So when you put this under the tongue, our body knows exactly what to do with it. It recognizes it. It is a complete brick of nutrition. Our body recognizes it immediately. If you need it in the brain, it's going to go to the brain. Some people have had an old injury. They can feel it vibrating. It's starting to work through something that maybe happened 20 years ago. I don't want you to let the diagnoses of anyone in the medical industry scare you, because there is always something you can do to get things under control. You've got to clean out the toxins from the body so that the body can recover. And that is what we're seeing over and over again. And again, this has multiple processes by which it works. The first of which is opening the microcirculation, which we are 80% microcirculation. This is going to go in and open up capillaries that are small, like 100 can fit in a human hair. That is the size of microcirculation this will open. It will help reverse age people with their biological age, the blood age, 20 to 25 years. We've run a study, 1,500 people. This doesn't extend telomeres. It actually creates new baby stem cells, and it increases our own body's capacity to make these baby stem cells by 300%. I personally, I'm in menopause in my 50s, not making a lot of stem cells, but with this spray, I have found these stem cells are repair cells, and old injuries are dissipating. And I'm watching I have a tracker of symptoms. I'm just crossing them off, and I'm a year in. So, with the inflammation reduction, the microcirculation opening, the stem cell increase, and the toxin removal, you are feeling amazing. And that is what we want for each and every one of you. We want you to jump on with us. We're calling it, like I said, the rescue mission. Get your health back. And do it naturally.
And how many years of science is behind this, Ash, along with how many plant combinations did it take them to find exactly what was needed for the sublingual?
Well, they've been studying this over 50 years, Stephanie. The science team in Europe started in 1973. It only made its way to the US in 2019. Again, it's the extraction process, not the molecules, but the extraction process is highly patented. There will never be another of this in the world. There is only one. There will never be another. They did 1.5 million variables in a supercomputer to come up with this particular synergistic blend of molecules that would do all the things I aforementioned. It is one of a kind. It is powerful. if you have a family member, a neighbor, a coworker, think of the people in your life who need this. Everybody knows someone who's sick. Everybody knows somebody who has issues, and like RFK said, 71% of Americans are dealing with chronic illness. That's not okay. Find the people that need this and get them on it. We can change the world one person at a time on this rescue mission.
And it also, especially for those who are very oriented in sports medicine, sports themselves, or nutrition. So when they brought the product to the States, who they first worked with was sports medicine doctors. And so they had over 3,800 sports medicine doctors that were working with their patients with this formula. And they found that recovery from injuries would go from months to weeks or weeks to days. So if you're very focused in fitness, nutrition, this is something that is going to be the powerhouse and foundation for what you should be taking, instead of all those supplements that sit in your body and only have 20% absorbed, while 80% of it goes to waste. And actually, I think that's more like 15% that gets absorbed, not 20. And so this is foundational. So when people are talking about, and I'm seeing stuff come out now about nutrition and how can you get the best bioavailable nutrition and what can superpower, and people are doing smoothies and shakes and all that. Well, that's going into the gut. Okay. Yeah. That's not getting into the bloodstream. And when it's not getting into the bloodstream, it's also not addressing the microcirculation, and it's not getting directly to the mitochondria of the cell that this is able to get to, because it's carrying that delivery of the oxygen nutrition that the blood carries throughout the body to all the tissues in the cells, where the digestion can pull some of that out, but you're losing a lot through that digestive tract anyway, and you're not getting what you need, which is why this is a superior product.
Absolutely. And we don't even know where those supplements are sourced. It's very sketchy. There's a lot of times no third-party testing on those supplements, and we lose 80% or more in our leaky gut, like you said. So getting it directly into the blood is paramount. And these are grown in a blue zone in Europe, in the Carpathian mountainside region. And so what that means is there are no pesticides, no poisons, no toxins in these. They are absolutely pristine, flown into the US, gone in through our science lab. Meticulously, the molecules are extracted in our laboratory, and they're poured fresh to order for you with these high frequency. It transmutes everything in the body that's low frequency. So you can't help but just start to feel better. And I have to, again, talk about this real quick, Steph, because this is huge. An alkaline environment is critical for our bodies right now, because as you know, some of the big diagnoses that you know of, those thrive in an acidic body. But Stephanie's body, as you can see here, off on the spray for how many months was this?
This was for the fifth month.
Fifth month. We're talking about she's living in an alkaline terrain. Her body is an alkaline terrain. Certain terrible illnesses cannot thrive in this type of terrain. So this is amazing. This alone is huge.
Not only that, but also, with the cream, I mean, you can tell that, look at the glow on my skin, right? I used to have heavy, heavy wrinkles here, side sleepers. So I'm always scrunching. As we get older, women get that development right there where you can see all the lines. They're gone. Okay. You can see that I've got a nice, beautiful glow. And today I am wearing makeup. A lot of times I do these and I don't wear the makeup, so you can kind of see a difference. But today I'm wearing makeup, but you can still see how my skin's glowing through that. And it's just phenomenal. And so as we age, in the makeup, for women, ladies, this, as we age, that makeup sits in your skin, right? So you see all the creases and the wrinkles. But having this as a base, you don't get that result with your makeup. It's a completely different effect. And so you don't look older by wearing makeup. You actually look your age or even younger. I do feel like my skin looks a lot better. And one of the first things my friends said to me before they even knew anything about this product, and I met them for dinner one night, they're like, wow, your eyes look so clear. I've never seen your eyes look that clear before. And you look like you're shining. And I just laughed. I'm like, oh, let me tell you about these products, Yep. And what's amazing is that people have such great results that we've surpassed 32 countries. Ash, how many countries are we in now?
Oh my gosh, we're getting ready to be global. I mean, we're just very.
I would say we are global.
Yeah, we're global. We're global for the patches, and we are going to be soon for the spray and the cream. But right. Yeah, it is coming quickly, and you do have that dewy glow We're talking about plants. We're talking about a food grade product, guys. And, you know, the owner often laughs. He's like, if you can't eat your skincare, you shouldn't be putting it on your skin. You can actually eat this on a cracker, the actual iRevive cream, and it helps with indigestion and GERD, and it just coats the digestive tract with these beautiful molecules from plants. And it is so powerful. Amazing.
And all plant-based.
Plant-based.
All plant-based.
Yep.
So if you have interest in these products, you want to know more, which is, like I said, it's very important to get educated before you take these, because it really does shift how you think and use the product. Then, you know, please join us. Check out our information down below. Get in contact with us. Either Ash or I can help you. And we hope that you discover this product and join us on the mission where we are trying to change people's lives and get them back to their cellular health the way God intended.
Yep. This is the real deal, guys. This is the one you've been looking for. Thanks, everybody, so much. We appreciate you checking in with us.